Our Unitarian Universalist churches are dedicated to the proposition that beyond our differences, beneath our diversity, there is a unity that binds us together and makes us one. We pause in silent witness to this unity.
Back in the beginning of winter, when we were facing a bleak, dark season ahead, Margaret came to me and said, "Wouldn't it be great to have a gardening service? We could share what we had learned from nature and how it shapes our worldview." Well, we have a long tradition in this congregation of lay-led services. UU's hold as one of our principles the acceptance of one another. So today, Margaret, Caroline, and I are going to draw from our own experiences and share insights and wisdom we've gained from our personal encounters with nature. In the quest to find the right plants, I would look in the nurseries for a variety of choices, small to tall, early spring flowers to late fall bloomers, and coordinating not only the flowering plants, but also varying the colors and textures of the foliage. Gardening feeds my soul. I am in my element. I am happy, except when I run into big problems. Groundhogs completely eating tender seedlings, poison ivy in my vegetable patch, grass and weeds invading my flower bed, and toughest of all, unexplained losses. As an example, one trip to the nursery, I spotted a lovely small bush just covered with delicate blossoms. I'd never seen a plant like that before. I brought it home and I put it in a prime location next to my backyard pond. I made sure it had good soil and plenty of water as it was getting established. It only survived 2 years. So with all my nurturing, why didn't it thrive? What else should I have done? Why did the nursery offer plants that couldn't survive New England winters? Some things are hard to explain. But gardening has helped me understand life. Nurturing is important. Life is fragile. Even if the weather forecast is for rain in the next 24 hours, but your plants look thirsty, you give them a drink now. When you see something that makes you take notice with amazement, whether it be the smell of a fragrant blossom or the towering height of a giant redwood tree, stop and appreciate it. Let the moment surround you in mindful awareness of the variety and power of nature. My tendency that leans toward perfectionism has been modified by my efforts in the garden. My choice of the perfect plant that doesn't survive, or my neighbor's leaves that blow into my yard after my diligent yard cleanup, or the broccoli plant stripped bare by the local groundhog, are all examples of lessons for me to let go of my expectations and accept that I am not in control of everything in my sphere of space. So I do my best to nurture, appreciate, and accept the world in my backyard and beyond.
When I was growing up, my mother was labeled permissive. To this day, I can't say that I'm certain what her detractors were getting at. To this day, none of my mother's 8 children or 17 grandchildren has gone to prison. We grew up to raise our own children, take care of our families, and make a contribution to society. As children, we were lively but not destructive. We had good manners, and we were quiet in church. As I reflect on her style, I think my mother enforced a few critical guidelines, but she treated her children as individuals and permitted them to become whatever they were growing into. I have often been told in a disparaging tone that I am getting more like my mother every day. I think perhaps I'm a permissive gardener. My theory of lawn care is never water, never feed, mow regularly. Throw some grass seed down in the spring, especially in bare spots. Over the decades, this regimen produces a mixed society of plants and many small delightful flowers, a lawn that is constantly changing and far greener and fuller than many of those who surround it. A yard that attracts and feeds a diverse ecosystem. While I truly love seeing a beautiful garden, somehow I can't seem to hold a picture in my head or work from a plan when I garden. It's more like I come upon plants, invite them to my yard, and find a place for them to stay. I generally opt for perennials as I admire those who are in it for the long haul. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I am neglectful, but my ways certainly favor the self-reliant. I have a camaraderie with the survivors in my garden. We have learned that there will be some wins and some losses, some good times when the sun and the rain are just right, some fortunate times when we are not besieged by the forces around us, and sometimes when we just have to tough it out. Each spring, as each survivor pushes its way into the growing sunlight, bigger and stronger than ever before, it feels to me like a beloved reunion. I greet each returnee individually and take a few moments for a wordless plant chat, just one being to another. My perennials remind me of the true miracle and meaning of resurrection. Gardening has also taught me about choices. Choices in the garden come both from failure and success. I am proud when my plants become overcrowded, and like a good mother, I reluctantly send them out into the wider world. I count that as a success, but after many years of trying, I have to admit I failed utterly with lupins. When I had lupins coming up, I would inevitably awaken to find them gone. The hardiest would try for a few years to come back, but always they were the rabbit's first choice. They were never above the soil long enough to thrive. I stopped planting them in an ecosystem where they just couldn't make it. Another choice for every gardener: what do you think is a weed, and what are you going to do about it? Having reflected over the years on weeding, I have realized that in the garden, I admittedly try to decide what may live and what should die. There have always been goddesses who snip the thread of life. Kali, Hecate, the Norns. I have been forced to realize by the garden that I am not a goddess, at least not entirely, yet. While I aspire to kill some of the dandelions, which I welcome in the grass but not in my gardens, the dandelions are stronger or smarter than I am. And don't even get me started on the bindweed. But even in this frustration, there's a gift. I am an impulsive weeder. There always comes a moment when I have walked by a particular dandelion too many times, and I go after it, hands ungloved, nails ready to be dirtied and broken, and there comes a moment when I have my hands in the soil, and I feel a peace and a connection that cannot be conveyed in words. My garden reminds me of my mother, and my garden is my teacher and my delight.
Pulling weeds and picking stones, we are made of dreams and bones. Feel the need to grow my own, for the time is close at hand. Grain for grain, sun and rain, find my way in nature's chain. Tune my body and my brain to the music from the land. Plant your rows straight and long, temper them with prayer and song. Mother Earth will make you strong if you give her love and care. An old crow watches hungrily from his perch in yonder tree. In my garden I'm as free as that feathered beast up there. Inch by inch and row by row, gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe, piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch and row by row, someone bless these seeds I sow. Someone warm them from below till the rain comes tumbling down. Blessed be.
Excellent. These are some of my favorite words from May Sarton. Help us to be the always hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, who know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers.